That's at a high level of abstraction. If we then talk about the particularization, here, individual differences among all of us and individual preferences are perfectly appropriate. So it's one thing to say the nutritionists have it right in saying that we need to get nutrients from certain categories. We need proteins, we need carbohydrates, we need fats. That's a universal objective fact right about all human beings. But whether you get your proteins from Japanese cuisine, whether you get your proteins from Italian cuisine, that's individualized, that's personal preference. That might also have something to do with cultural conditioning and so forth, which can be widely variable as well. So I think there's not a contradiction between, on the one hand, saying that values are universal and objective, and at the same time saying that they are particularized and personalized. We need to stay warm. That means we need to wear clothes, but do you wear cotton or wool or leather? That's a choice. No problem, there's no contradiction in between the objective, right, so to speak, and the subjective. If we go back to the food example, I like the dirt example, whether you like Japanese food or Italian food, right, or whatever, that's a perfectly legitimate range. But someone who says, no, I eat dirt, right, and only dirt, right, just go out and scoop it up, but that's wrong. They're making a mistake. We should be able to say, well, that's not within the generic range, right, of fitting the nutritional needs, right, and so forth. All right, the political implications here. Autonomy and authoritarianism. How am I doing on time, Martini? I might start late, so oh, all right, that sounds like a blank check. This issue here of if we believe on the one hand that there are truths and objective morals, does that not then set us up for traditional dogmatism, right, and authoritarianism? I have the truth, I know what's good, and I also know what's good for you because I've got the objective answer, and so therefore, if you are making a mistake, then I am morally obligated, or at least I morally have the permission to step in and stop you from doing what you're doing or make you do something that I think is good for you. Does then not objectivity lead to authoritarian types of politics, and is that not the problem? I would say the answer to that question is no, and the reason is that that ignores half of the equation. One thing to say, there are certain things that are objectively good, but if good is a relationship, that is to say there are things out there in the environment, right, that must be sought, actions that must be performed, but it's also the case that human beings are subjects, right, of a certain nature. So one thing that's important is not only that I need food, but it's also important that I am the person who has to engage in the productive activities to create the food. I need to have, say, beliefs about what the meaning of my life is. I would argue that's a psychological need, right, of human beings. But I also, as a human being, am the being who has the responsibility to exercise my own judgment and decide what the meaning of my life is, and the same thing goes for you. So it's the thing that there are two things that have to be done here. One is that people have to get the right answer in the right range. That's what the objectivity right part is picking up. The other side of the equation is that people have to do it for themselves. And that is what the subjectivity right side is trying to pick up. So it's what's the right answer and how the right answer, those two have to be integrated. So if one thing for me to say, you should believe, say, in Austrian economics, I might be right. That objectively, Austrian economics is the best thing that we've got going with respect to economics. But as an authoritarian imposition, that's going to be completely useless to you. Right? The only way it works, given the kinds of creatures we are, is if you individually think it through, decide for yourself. And so authoritarian impositions just don't work, right, given the nature of the beast, so to speak, right, that you are. So I think it's perfectly legitimate, right, to say that there are right answers, but then at the same time, the realization and the reaching of those right answers is an individual, uniquely personal responsibility that we all have to engage in. And then on making the case for the free society, the fourth point right here on the list here, I do then come down on the objectivist side here, and I think when I speak to people on the Austrian side, I think this is where there's a terminological issue that comes to the front and center. But I do think that liberty is not a whim. It's not a mere personal preference, that it is built objectively into the requirements of human social living. If we are going to be moral beings, if we're going to be prosperous beings, then I think all of the empirical evidence shows, I think all the analytic evidence shows, that my understanding of that, we can make an objective social scientific case for liberty being a universal value, right, for all people. I think that's to come down on the objective side, right, science. But at the same time, that's not a disembodied, impersonal, right, thing that just kind of floats out there. Liberty is a personal value. It matters, it should matter to us as individuals, and of course as teachers and educators and intellectuals, getting other people to realize the importance to their autonomy. It is an important part of the topic as well. So liberty is an objective value and a deeply personal value. I don't think there's a contradiction there. Okay. Okay, good. We'll have plenty of time. Good. I'm going to make just one more point. So far, what I've been doing today is trying to show what I think the commonalities are between philosophy, broadly speaking, and political economy. That there are two parts of the same intellectual enterprise rather than being siloed. And I think, in my judgment, the objectivist approach to philosophy and the Austrian approach to economics, there's a great deal of synergy, right, and overlap. Some terminological issues I think that can and should be sorted out there. But let me make just one more point in closing that I think is a bit of a difference between the objectivist approach to making a case for the free society and the Austrian, right, approach to free society. And that focuses on what I call the positive and the negative. Here I think there's a complementarity here, and the divides might be deeper than I'm suggesting here. But my reading of Hayek's brilliant, absolutely astute in critiquing variations on the planned society. Marxism won't work. Fascism, right, won't work. Keynesian approaches won't work. Excellent. And so then by default, we come over to a kind of a free society. But the degree, and I'm taking Hayek as representative here, so it's a bit of an overgeneralization because there are any number of other Austrians, but I think Hayek is central here. Let's just read this passage together. If our conclusions on the merits of planning, various sorts of planning, are essentially negative, this is certainly no cause for satisfaction. I perked up when Professor Werner yesterday was quoting a letter that Hayek wrote to Popper suggesting that they label their joint philosophical enterprise negativism. This is all the conclusions that they're reaching are essentially negative right here. Then Hayek goes on to say, nothing could do more to relieve the unmitigated gloom with which the economists today must look at the future of the world than if it could be shown that there is a possible and practical way to overcome planning's difficulties. So what we're saying is we have an essentially negative conclusion. Here is the socialist paradigm. We should be able centrally to organize everything in a top-down fashion, specified right this, that, and the other thing, and that will lead us on to a wonderful and beautiful and noble and prosperous right kind of society. And Hayek comes along and just punctures the balloon, right? And all of the other little trial balloons, he punctures all the balloons, and so essentially a negative enterprise. No pretty balloons, no floating, we're just left with in effect, nothing. And then he goes on to say, it would be nice if, in effect, socialism were true. Then we wouldn't have to be so gloomy about the prospect of the world. He goes on then a little bit later to say, what I had done had often seemed to be more to point out barriers to further advance on the path chosen by others than to supply new ideas which open the path to further development. Which then, again, is to reiterate the point that Hayek at this stage, or at least at this portion of his work, is seeing his project as purely negative, as purely critical, I don't really have any idea what the good society is going to be. I don't have any positive goals to do. Instead, all of these other people are proposing various kinds of ideals and so forth, and I'm just going to knock them down one after the other, and that's what the best results of economic science